All right, so we're going to look at how to find these horizontal intercepts, these zeros, for our quadratic function. So we're going to look at two algebraic ways of doing this. And the first one is that we're going to use our factored form. So if your quadratic function isn't in factored form, we can put it in factored form. In most cases, not all cases, but most of the time we can do that. And then we can use the zero product property. All right. So I have x squared minus 11x plus 18. Because there is a 1 in front of that x squared, I know my a is 1. And so I'm just going to write x, it'll be plus or minus something, and then another x plus or minus something, because there's really just a 1 out here in front. So I don't need to write that down. And the way that foiling works is that I know that these two numbers here have to multiply to make 18. So numbers that make 18 would be like 2 and 9. If I multiply 2 times 9, I'll get 18. And then to figure out what sign to use, I look here and I see that this is a minus sign and this is a plus. So if I multiply two negative numbers together, I'll get a positive number, which is what must have happened here. And when I add these two up, I'll get that negative 11 that's there. All right, so I put it into factored form, and now I can use that zero product property. So I have x minus 2 is 0 and x minus 9 is 0. That gives me x equals 2 and x equals 9 as my zeros. So if I look at a graph of this is where 2 is, and here is 9 over here. And my parabola is going to do something like this. Okay, it's got to go through those 2 points on the x-axis. All right, I have x squared minus 2x minus 3. So I know it's going to be x plus or minus something for both of those. And then I need two numbers that multiply together to make negative 3. So the only things I can think of easily to make 3 is just 1 and 3. And because this is negative, I know one of these is positive and one of these is negative. And I see that this is a minus 2 in the middle. So I'm going to make the 3 the minus, and the 1 is a plus, because minus 3 plus 1 gives me that minus 2 that's in the middle. So x plus 1 is equal to 0. I'm going to apply that zero product property. That gives me x is negative 1 and x is 3. So graphically, this is where negative 1 is, and here's where 3 is over here. My parabola has to go through those two spots on the x-axis. I have x squared plus 4x minus 21. So I am thinking this is x plus or minus something and x plus or minus something. And I need two numbers that multiply together to make negative 21. And that would be a 3 and a 7. Because it's negative, I know one of these two is positive and one of these two is negative. So look at this one in the middle, and it's positive. So since it's positive, I'm going to make the bigger one over here positive and the smaller one negative. So 7 minus 3 gives me that positive 4 there. And I'll apply my zero product property. So x minus 3 is 0, x plus 7 is 0. So x is 3 and x is negative 7. And I have one last one here. So some of you might be tempted to not do this factored form and try a different trick with this one, because there's a 3 in front of the x squared, which does often make it more difficult to factor. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that 3 out first, and then we'll see if we can factor this thing. So if I take the 3 out, that leaves me with an x squared minus 4. And you might remember that from high school, that this is a difference of squares. So this is x minus 2 and x plus 2. Okay. And now I have 3 things being multiplied that make 0. So I can set each one of these equal to 0, and then we're going to take a look at what that means exactly. Okay, so I'm going to start on this end first. So x plus 2 equals 0 gives me a 0 of x is negative 2. And x minus 2 equals 0 gives me x equals 2. And then can 3 equal 0? probably not. I think that's not okay. So I'm going to change that to a not equal to. And this part just doesn't apply. Okay, so actually, if we look at this form here, it turns out that our A is a 3. Our R is this 2, and the S is the negative 2. All right, so that is our factored form. And when we come back, we're going to look at the quadratic formula. So if factoring isn't your thing or you're struggling to factor, because not all of these can be factored, the quadratic formula will always work and will always give you an answer. It just requires a little bit more work.